China and Japan both claim the same tiny string of islands, known as the Diaoyu Islands to the Chinese and the Senkaku Islands to the Japanese. Japan established an air defense identification zone over the islands in 1968. Think of it as an extra buffer extending beyond Japan's normal territorial airspace. Then last month, China declared its own air defense zone, one that overlaps Japan's zone above the disputed islands. Under China's rules, any aircraft entering the zone must notify Beijing, under threat of military force.
We currently assess a conflict over the Senkaku Diaoyu Islands as a very low probability. The deployment of particularly Chinese maritime constabulary vessels to the islands indicates that while China is attempting to increase its influence and presence around the islands, it's not necessarily seeking any kind of conflict to resolve the issue right now. And it's very difficult to assess what a conflict over the islands would look like. There's currently no presence on the islands themselves, and it would be very difficult for either China or Japan to build a permanent deployment on these islands before any kind of retaliation.
Hi, Assalamualaikum. So, based on the video we have shown, we chose the Diaoyu Senkaku Islands dispute as our case study. In this presentation, we are going to dive in and analyze the complex dispute between China and Japan over the Diaoyu Senkaku Island. So, this is our table of contents. Firstly, we are going to tell the history of China-Japan relations before the dispute and the historical background of Diaoyu Senkaku dispute. Next, we are going to proceed with the foreign policy approaches and theory of internal relation related in this dispute. Also, we are going to explain the implications on both countries and the solutions implemented in this dispute. And these are all our team members. I'm Bibi, Nuralya, Maisara, and we have Umi Mariyah, Rizqel Fatihah, Syazwana, Shahira, and Noraini.
My name is Umi Mariyah binti Zulkeria. As the first presenter of our group, I will talk about the introduction for our topic. China and Japan claim sovereignty over Senkaku Diaoyu Islands in the East China Sea. Japan effectively controls them, but China asserts historical claims. The tensions escalated due to the potential oil and gas reserve in the surrounding waters, leading to heightened political and military posturing. The relationship between both countries is intricate due to their geographic proximity, shared history, economic interdependence, and cultural exchanges. Despite territorial disputes and historical grievance, China recognized Japan as crucial neighbor and partner.
There's several aspects to the East China Sea dispute. The first is, of course, it's a sea. So it's a maritime boundary in Northeast Asia for South Korea, Japan, and China, as well as Taiwan. In the headlines today, of course, the East China Sea is most thought of because of the dispute between Japan and China over the Senkaku, as the Japanese call them, or the Diaoyu, as the Chinese refer to them.
My name is Syazwana binti Hassan. I'm going to talk about historical background of Diaoyu Senkaku Islands. The Diaoyu Senkaku Islands dispute is a complex and long-standing territorial disagreement that involves China and Japan along with Taiwan. It impacts diplomatic relations, regional security, and economic consideration. Efforts to find a peaceful resolution such as diplomatic initiative, confidence-building measures, and international mediation have faced challenges due to the deep-rooted historical national factors. This report discusses the Diaoyu Senkaku Islands dispute between Japan and China and analyzes it using aspects of territorial and maritime sovereignty, international law, natural resource exploration, and the role of the United States as well as the geopolitical implications of the same. One of the key points of the dispute is its historical background, which is that the islands have a historical legacy dating back to the late 19th century when they came under Japanese control. The People's Republic of China refers to them as the Diaoyu Tao, as well as the Republic of China in Taiwan, which call them the Diaoyu Leyu. For more explanation, in the late 19th century during the First Sino-Japanese War in 1894 to 1895, Japan gained control of Taiwan and its associated islands including the Diaoyu Islands. The Treaty of Shimonoseki, which was signed in 1895, formally ceded Taiwan and its affiliated island to Japan. After World War II in 1945, Japan surrendered and the Allied power led by the United States took control of the territories previously held by Japan. The Diaoyu Islands, along with other Japanese territories, were placed under US administration as part of the broader restructuring of post-war Asia. China challenges of legitimacy of Japan's control over the Diaoyu Islands based on historical claims that predate the First Sino-Japanese War. Chinese historical records and maps are often cited to assert that the islands were historically part of Chinese territory. The First Sino-Japanese War played a crucial role in the historical context of the dispute. The conflict was primarily over influence in Korea, and its aftermath resulted in territorial changes, including the cession of Taiwan and the Diaoyu Islands to Japan. Taiwan's sovereignty claim over the Diaoyu Islands showed that it aligns its position with that of the People's Republic of China. Taiwan shared a historical narrative with the People's Republic of China, emphasizing China's historical claims that the Diaoyu Islands and challenging the legality of Japan's control over them. This island is not only about territorial claims but also involves significant resource and economic interests, making the issues more complex and challenging to resolve. The waters surrounding the Diaoyu Senkaku Islands are believed to be rich in marine resources, particularly fisheries, and provide a habitat for various fish species, making the region important for fishing activities. Beyond fisheries, there is speculation that the East China Sea, where the islands are located, may have significant oil and natural gas reserves beneath its seabed.
At a regular press briefing, China's Foreign Ministry spokesman Lu Kang said the Diaoyu Islands and its adjacent islands have been an inherent part of Chinese territory since ancient times. He added that China firmly defends its territorial sovereignty and that any attempt to infringe upon that would be futile. He urged Japan to adopt a correct historical view when educating young people and to stop stirring up troubles on the relevant issue. South Korea and China have for years been at loggerheads with Japan over territorial and historical disputes, which have proved to be among the most divisive factors in their respective relations with Tokyo.
Hi, Assalamualaikum. My name is Bibi Nuralya Maisara, and I'll be presenting the foreign policy's approaches in the Diaoyu Senkaku dispute. So the first one is historical claim policy, implemented by China and Japan. Supported by recent proof of the islands being governed as part of Taiwan during the Ming and Qing dynasties, as articulated in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs article, underlines that Diaoyu Dao is China's inherent territory in all historical, geographical and legal terms. Based on evidence, China has cited maps such as those by Hayashi Shihei and the British Royal Navy, which highlights as an extensive collection of historical records. Japan's efforts also had analyzed by historical records. This is proved by a 2012 remark by Japanese Prime Minister, who clearly states that the Senkaku Islands are part of Japan and are based on historical evidence and international law. The next foreign policy is legal basis and administrative control. Japan's argument is that when Japan invaded the island in the late 1800s, they were uninhabited and terra nullius, which means nobody's land. But in contrast, Taiwan's stance on the conflict is heavily influenced by its relationship with mainland China and its assertion of fishing rights in the disputed waters, which contributing to the complexity of the issue. And the last foreign policy I'll be presenting is security alliance. As a close ally of the United States, Japan relies on the US-Japan Security Treaty, which serves as a strategic element in the counterbalancing China's assertiveness in the East China Sea. Other than that, US takes neutral stance by emphasizing a peaceful resolution and adherence to international law. This security alliance represents a crucial aspect of Japan's foreign policy as it provides a foundation for regional stability and reinforces Japan's position in the territorial dispute.
U.S. Secretary of Defense Leon Panetta is currently in China after meeting with Japanese defense officials in Tokyo earlier this week. Panetta's visit to both countries underscores the U.S. desire to maintain the status quo regarding ownership of the Diaoyu Senkaku Islands, while eschewing any move that could let what is ultimately a political issue spiral into something worse. While in Japan on September 17th, Secretary Panetta said the U.S. will not take a stand regarding the disputed Diaoyu Senkaku island chain. But he did affirm that the islands fall under the scope of the U.S.-Japan treaty. Against a backdrop of anti-Japanese protests in dozens of Chinese cities, as well as Beijing's decision to send 6 surveillance vessels to the disputed islands over the weekend, Panetta reaffirmed the need for calm and restraint.
My name is Nur Shahira binti Azman, and I will explain the 3 theories of IR related to Diaoyu and Senkaku Island. In realism, states use calculated moves to protect their interests by maintaining or shifting the balance of power. China's recent effort to establish actual control in the Diaoyu-Senkaku region hint a possible challenge to Japan's long-standing hegemony. The increasing amount of time Chinese ships spend near the island point to a shift in the direction of control. Japan's attempt to protect its own interests and keep the peace in the region are helped by the strong diplomatic and political alliance between the US and Japan. At the same time, China is trying to change the balance of power in the region by putting more emphasis on its peaceful intention and pressuring the US to find a middle ground with Japan. Next is liberalism. China and Japan have attempted to resolve their island conflict through dialogue and the use of organization. However, depending on the current situation and both countries' willingness to follow through on this anthem, the efficacy and success of this effort tend to change. Lastly, under the lens of constructivism, the island is very important to both countries' national identity. The constructed narrative that surround this land have a significant impact on the policy and action that are implemented by both countries, combining the historical and emotional significance of this island with economic significance. The struggle over these territories thus turn into an expression of the national identity that has been established, influencing China and Japan's perspective on the territorial dispute.
尖閣諸島周辺の我が国領海に侵入した中国艦船2隻は現在も領海内にとどまっていると、すでに、10時47分ですから丸2日を超えてこうした状況が続いているということで誠に遺憾だというふうに思っております。現場海域において我が国の海上保安庁の巡視船が中国艦船に向けて領海からの退去要求を繰り返し実施するとともに。
Next, my name is Rizqel Fatihah, binti Abdullah. I'm gonna explain further about 4 impacts on both countries, which is China and Japan. The first impact is economic impact. The Diaoyu and Senkaku Island dispute impact China and Japan economically due to rich fishing ground and potential oil and gas reserve. This argument over fishing rights lead to clashes and hindering business dealing. Besides, exploration near the island adds tension, potentially impacting China and Japan trade relations and regional economic cooperation. The dispute's uncertainties may discourage commerce and investment, affecting both countries and the broader region. Next is social impact. Territorial dispute fuel intense patriotic sentiments and dividing societies. Political leaders leverage nationalism, complicating resolution efforts. Socially, anti-Japanese protests in China and anti-Chinese sentiments in Japan disrupt tourism, cultural exchanges, and education cooperation. The impact extends beyond geopolitical, affecting daily life and connection between citizens. The third one is political impact. The Diaoyu Senkaku Island dispute triggers nationalist sentiment in China and Japan, impacting the domestic politics and policy action. Heightened tension lead to the public release and political posturing by complicating the resolution efforts. Beyond the bilateral relationship, this nationalist feeling contribute to regional instability, posing challenges in managing broader geopolitical implications. Resolving the conflict required addressing not only territorial claim but also navigating the delicate interplay of national and regional stability. But not least is military impact. The military dimension of the Diaoyu Senkaku Island dispute raises security concerns in China and Japan, impacting the Asia-Pacific region. Military build-up and provocative action near the island increase the risk of the clashes. The conflict affects alliance dynamic, with the United States monitoring the situation and contributing to Japan's defense. The presence of U.S. military assets underscores the interconnected security concerns stemming from the territorial disagreement.
Tensions around the islands recently. Judging by reports, it looks like the PLA have been sending more ships into the area over the last few months or so. And tensions hit a new high last week when there was a standoff between Chinese and Japanese vessels after 2 Chinese ships trailed a Japanese sailing boat in the region and eventually ended up coming within a few miles of one of the islands. You get the idea then. The wider escalation in Indo-Pacific tensions has been accompanied by an uptick in maritime altercations, which in turn has reignited the dispute over the Senkaku Islands. This is just one of many geopolitical tensions right now, though. China is an obvious example of an actor whose decisions seem increasingly troubling, and tensions around the islands recently. Judging by reports, it looks like the PLA have been sending more ships into the area over the last few months or so. And tensions hit a new high last week when there was a standoff between Chinese and Japanese vessels after 2 Chinese ships trailed a Japanese sailing boat in the region and eventually ended up coming within a few miles of one of the islands. You get the idea then. The wider escalation in Indo-Pacific tensions has been accompanied by an uptick in maritime altercations, which in turn has reignited the dispute over the Senkaku Islands. This is just one of many geopolitical tensions right now, though. China is an obvious example of an actor whose decisions seem increasingly troubling, and tensions around the islands recently. Judging by reports, it looks like the PLA have been sending more ships into the area over the last few months or so. And tensions hit a new high last week when there was a standoff between Chinese and Japanese vessels after 2 Chinese ships trailed a Japanese sailing boat in the region and eventually ended up coming within a few miles of one of the islands. You get the idea then. The wider escalation in Indo-Pacific tensions has been accompanied by an uptick in maritime altercations, which in turn has reignited the dispute over the Senkaku Islands. This is just one of many geopolitical tensions right now, though.
My name is Noraini Wahid. So, there are solutions for Diaoyu Senkaku Island dispute. Firstly, joint resource development. China and Japan could explore more cooperative agreements for the exploitation of fisheries or potential oil and gas resources, creating shared economic interests that may contribute to stability and improve relations. Secondly, normalization of relations. Normalizing diplomatic relations and emphasizing the importance of stable and constructive relations between China and Japan could create a conducive atmosphere for addressing the territorial dispute. Next, diplomacy and bilateral negotiations. China could emphasize the importance of direct bilateral negotiation with Japan to address the dispute. Moreover, international mediation or arbitration. China and Japan could involving a natural third party such as an international organization or mediator could provide an impartial forum for negotiation and help build confidence in the fairness of the process. Other than that, confidence building measures. Implementing confidence building measures can help reduce tensions and foster trust between China and Japan. Next, establishment of a code of conduct. China could work with Japan to establish a code of conduct for the waters surrounding the disputed islands. Lastly, crisis prevention mechanism. Implementing mechanism to prevent accidental clashes or escalation, such as establishing communication channels and protocols to avoid misunderstanding and unintended conflicts in the disputed area.
As a conclusion, the Senkaku-Diaoyu Islands dispute is emblematic of broader geopolitical tensions in East Asia. The historical claims of both China and Japan over these islands have become intertwined with contemporary political, economic, and security concerns. The involvement of the United States, due to its security alliances with Japan, adds another layer of complexity to the issue.
I'm so hungry. I haven't eaten yet.
So sorry, I have things to do.
Can you please proceed?
Okay, sorry. So we're going to talk about the dispute of Diaoyu Senkaku Island in China and Japan.
So, actually, I have a question about this issue. So, what do you guys think the role that nationalism play in China's approach to the dispute? Anyone?
Let me answer about that. So, the Chinese government often use nationalist sentiment to gain public support for its territorial claims over the islands. The government strategically used historical records and emphasized the importance of the islands to the Chinese nation, which indirectly foster a sense of pride and unity among the population.
I see. Thank you for answering my questions.
Okay, so how does the Diaoyu Senkaku Island dispute affect regional security dynamics?
I want to answer. The dispute has made safety concerns in the East China Sea more serious, causing more military action and patrol by China and Japan. The chance of making mistakes in the area where they disagree make regional security more complicated. The increased military action and patrol by China and Japan in the East China make the situation more tense and possibly unstable. I want to ask, in general, why are China and Japan disputing ownership over the Diaoyu Senkaku Island? What could be done to resolve this disagreement diplomatically?
I think I can answer this. So basically, the strategic geographical position of the islands in the East China Sea makes them extremely important. And the agreement is further complicated when the importance of the island is acknowledged by both nations. And the diplomatic measures that can be done, I think bilateral talks, collaborative development activities, or defining rules for the maritime dispute area are some examples of possible ways to end this dispute.
So, I want to ask how the dispute over Diaoyu and Senkaku Island impacted the diplomatic relation between China and Japan.
Okay, for the question, the dispute has strained diplomatic relations, which caused the other tensions to rise from time to time. Both nations have engaged the verbal exchanges, make the diplomatic situation more complicated. So, nationalistic sentiment on both sides may be increased by the dispute, which make it difficult for leaders to have effective dialogue without facing domestic pressure. So, in general, the argument about Diaoyu Senkaku Island is still causing problems in how China and Japan get along. So, it is hard for them to foster a more cooperative and mutually beneficial partnership. Resolving this territorial disagreement remains a key challenge for diplomatic normalization between the two nations, which is China and Japan.
I would like to ask one question, which are, what are the potential risks of military posturing by China in the region?
Can I try answering this question? But I'm not sure if this is right. But the military posturing by China in dispute carries several potential risks, such as heightened tensions between China and other claimant countries. But also, the installation of military assets in disputed areas has the potential to destabilize the wider region.
Good answer.
Oh, thank you.
Okay, so next I have a question. What role do international laws and agreements play in determining the ownership of disputed territories, like in this case, Diaoyu Senkaku Islands?
Let me answer that question. Basically, international law and agreements serve as guiding framework for resolving territory dispute, like the one concerning the Diaoyu and Senkaku Island. The applicability and interpretation of this law, however, often vary depending on the circumstance and the willingness of the parties that are involved. The application of international law like the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea, UNCLOS, complex due to its focus on maritime boundaries. Additionally, resolution via the International Court of Justice (ICJ) require mutual agreement from the involved party, which might not always occur in territorial dispute.
Okay. I think everyone gave the best answer, so I think that's all for today. Good job, everyone.
Let's go. Send the keys. Okay, thank you.